Alright, so we're talking about the vector product again. This time we're going to be talking about the vector product in component form. There's a lot to get through here. It's going to sort of twist your brain a little bit because we've got to work on a two-dimensional page but talk about three-dimensional stuff. So, first of all, let's set it up. We've got an x-axis. Now, this is the I component of any vector. So, horizontal across the page. We've got a y component. Now this is the ij component. This is the j component of any vector. Now I've got to put my pen out of the page here. And I'm going to do that by doing a 45-degree angle here. This represents a page coming straight, a pen coming straight out. So this is going to be my k, or my z-axis. So I've got an x-axis, a y-axis, and a z-axis, but that's represented this way, like this. Okay. Now, if we look at our formula here for the vector product, so remember that two vectors multiplied by each other is equal to the magnitude of one times the magnitude of another sine, the angle between them, and then the unit vector perpendicular to that, times the unit vector perpendicular to it. Now let's look at some special cases. If I was to do I times I, so just a unit vector I times the other unit vector I, magnitude 1 times magnitude 1, sine 0, that's a 0, because the angle between two vectors going in the I direction is going to be 0. And then our vector perpendicular, well, I'm going to get 1 times 0 times that unit vector. That's going to be equal to the number 0. So, I times I is going to be equal to 0. Now, so is j times j, and so is k times k. Alright, so that's fairly explanatory. If we do a vector product of I components, j components, or k components, we're going to get 0, 0, or 0. So there's our first little lot of special vector multiplications, vector products. So let's try I times j. If I do a unit vector I times a unit vector j, now the magnitude of the I is going to be 1. The magnitude of j is going to be 1. Now, this is going to be sine 90. And then unit vector perpendicular. So that's going to be 1 times 1 times 1 times the unit vector that's perpendicular to I and j. And the unit vector that's perpendicular to I and j is k. And you'll notice that I'm screwing in an anti-clockwise direction because I'm doing I times j. So if I'm screwing in an anti-clockwise direction, this tells us, anti-clockwise, that it's going to go outwards. Anti-clockwise, outwards. And outwards is positive. So if I'm going outwards, this is going to be 1 times 1 times 1 times the positive direction of k. Okay, positive direction of k. Let me show you something that's going to result in the opposite, like a negative direction of something. Alright, so let's try I times k. So if I'm doing I times k, that's going to be 1 times sine 90, because there's 90 degrees between them, times the unit vector. Now, which way are we talking about here? It's going to be 1 times 1 times 1 times, let's look here, we're doing I times k. It's screwing this way, or turn your hand up, it's screwing that way, which, if we look at our thing here, is clockwise, And if we're screwing clockwise, we're going inwards. That's into the page, that way. So that results in a negative J. A negative J. Now it depends on which orders you multiply things in. Now luckily there's a handy table to remember all of this, and a handy little diagram to help you remember it as well. Alright, so this table is something you might want to memorize. It says the vector I times the vector I is 0, j times j is 0, k times k is 0. The vector j times I, negative k. The vector j times k, I times j, k, I times k, negative j. So these will give you these will tell you whether the vectors are positive or negative. Now if you don't want to remember the table, you can remember this little diagram, I, j, k. So if you do I times j, it'll be positive k. If you do j times k, it'll be positive I. If you do k times I, it'll be positive j. Now if you do I times k, that's backwards, you'll get negative j. If you do k times j, that's backwards, you'll get negative I. And so on. You can use that table to figure those out. Okay, take some notes, table, this one, then we'll talk about a quick example of this in action.